everyone. It's so nice to see you all online, and welcome to the parents and family and friends who have joined us as well. We're looking forward to hearing all the speakers. We heard them give their first speeches at school, which seems like a lifetime ago, but it's really nice to hear them, listen to them, and thank you to all their classmates for joining as well. And I will hand over to Rabbi Kennard.
Thank you. It is unfortunate that we are here on Zoom and we are not all together in school, but it is at the same time, the silver lining is that we have the technology and we are able to gather for this occasion, and we are able to hear the wonderful speeches that we're about to enjoy. Although I do want to point out how hard it is to speak on Zoom when you don't have the ability to read the room and see people's reactions and hear people chuckle or clap. So that's an added challenge for our competitors this morning. I want to say well done to everyone who was in the heats, which is everyone, and especially well done to those who've made it through to the finals. Public speaking is something we're very proud of in Mount Scopus because we think it's very important. Public speaking helps one organize one's ideas, find the words in which to express them, and then the power to share those ideas with another person or a group of people. And it's that power to share ideas and to learn together that really is the driving force of civilization itself. So one can't overestimate the importance of public speaking and the ability to create and share an argument. So that's what we're going to see today. So as I say, we're looking forward to a wonderful display of great quality. And now I hand over to our MCs for this morning.
Welcome teachers, students, guests, and our esteemed judge, Rabbi Kennard, to our Year 9 Baron Snider Finals for 2021. This year's topic was Caught in the Crossfire. During the heats, we heard speeches that focused on the many problems people face throughout the world, especially during the current pandemic, which has unfortunately meant that we will be presenting these finals online for the second year in a row. Speaking in front of an audience is difficult enough without the extra challenge of speaking to a screen, so we acknowledge the extra effort these speakers have put in today.
Baron Snider was a politician admired for his ability to articulate his ideas clearly and succinctly. He had a passion for debating, and this resulted in him winning the United Australian Debating Championship in 1939. And him representing Australia at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in 1959. Baron Snider was the driving force behind the school's initial public speaking competition, which began in 1964. The competition is held in very high regard by the students and teaching staff. It promotes excellence in every year level, as well as fostering oratorical skills. After his death in 1966, the competition came to be called the Baron Snider Public Speaking Competition. On that note, congratulations to the finalists of the heats who will be presenting their speeches shortly.
First up, who will be speaking about the sexualization of women in society.
Some would say that we've come a long way in terms of reducing the sexualization of women. But honestly, I think we still have a long way to go. Although women aren't the only ones who are sexualized today, women are much more likely to be sexualized in a variety of media channels. From Playboy magazines to Disney movies, there are very few bounds to limits of sexualization today. Researchers at Wesleyan University found that on average, across 58 different magazines, 51.8% of women that were featured in these magazines were portrayed as sex objects, and women in advertisements in men's magazines were objectified 76% of the time. Young girls are impacted from a young age by society's perceptions of their own bodies. In Little Mermaid, Ariel, who was only 16 years old, wears a small clown bikini top which shows off her unrealistically thin waist. This creates unhealthy beauty standards for girls from a young age, showing that to be in the norm, one must have a tiny waist and show off their body. This is also shown in Jasmine's clothing. Not only are her clothes historically inaccurate, but they are completely inappropriate for a 15-year-old girl. Furthermore, in Aladdin, Jasmine attempts to seduce and ends up kissing Jafar, who is meant to be in his late 40s to early 50s. Not only does this completely sexualize a character that's meant to be a minor, but it reinforces the idea that women are just objects. And these are only two of many, many examples. Through these negative stereotypes that come from the media, women in real life are degraded and disrespected. Only last year, there was a scandal with Australia Post's ex-CEO Christine Holgate, who gifted 4 Cartier watches for securing a deal with the country's largest banks in 2018. As a result of many different political scandals, a series of drawings are made to press political agendas, and this one was no exception. David Rowe, a political cartoonist, drew a cartoon for the Australian Financial Review that pictured Christine as a prostitute, leaving the Prime Minister at a bar in a promiscuous nurse costume, completely degrading Christine's character. As a woman in a position of power within the business world, it is unfortunately quite common for drawings like these to be made, but that doesn't make it okay. Left in shambles at this horrible display, one that never would have been made for a male CEO, helps outline the gender-based injustice that still remains today. No matter how successful and intelligent Christine is in the business world, David humiliated her. And what does this say about us? An incredible and intelligent woman was disrespected and subjected to the sexist ideals of women's position beneath men. The consequences of the sexualization of girls and women are huge, including some mental disorders such as anxiety about appearance, eating disorders, and depression. According to the Dove Self-Esteem Project, only 11% of girls worldwide would call themselves beautiful. A third of all Japanese 6-year-olds experience low body confidence, and 81% of 10-year-old girls in the US say they're afraid of being fat. And I could share so many more alarming statistics with you, but you get the point. The lack of unsexualized representation of women in the media, conditioning young girls to seek validation from men and accept the idea that women are just objects. So I hope you need no further convincing this is a serious and universal problem, and you are asking yourself what can be done. The Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, the For Every Girl campaign, and Together for Girls are 3 of many different organizations that help engage, educate, and influence media producers to aid gender representation within their products. But the reality remains that unless these media producers take that step to stop using women's bodies to advertise unhealthy values for the sake of economic profit, we won't get anywhere. But it's about time to move the needle and to create a healthier world for women and for everyone.
Thank you for that informative speech on objectification and unrealistic beauty expectations.
Now, could we all please welcome from 9A to speak about differing beliefs?
A recent Gallup poll found that 54% of the Jewish population worldwide view themselves as non-religious or agnostic, while a further 2% see themselves as atheist. As a member of that 2%, I wondered how many other atheists also attend a Jewish school. To understand what a Jewish school is, let's examine what the role of a religious school is. A religious school provides religious content in its curriculum or in how it operates. It goes beyond providing an adequate education and aims to build faith and connection with the faith the school is part of. They do this by teaching religious education in addition to secular studies, as well as having a stable environment or community where religious expression is encouraged. And what about atheism, you might ask? It is the denial of metaphysical beliefs in God or spiritual beings, an atheist being someone who simply lacks belief in the existence of God. Atheists are often science-orientated due to needing tangible evidence to support their convictions. Clearly then, atheism would be in opposition to religious education, which is centered around beliefs. Understanding these two terms is crucial in exploring their discrepancies and where atheists in religious schools are caught in the crossfire. In a religious school, students are required to spend a certain amount of time learning religious practices. This includes the expectation that they participate in religious activities and ceremonies. They are also required to follow religious law to the extent that it is upheld within the school. Being an atheist means that the religious content has no special meaning and religious activities are performed out of respect rather than personal conviction. This forces students in this position to make difficult choices to remain a model student and to compete for academic excellence while maintaining their own beliefs. A lack of enthusiasm related to a religious activity, such as a prayer, for example, might be viewed as presumptuous and rude, making it extremely hard for atheists to find middle ground. Furthermore, being an atheist makes it hard to relate to religious experiences that others bring from home, school, and other environments. I'm reminded of my friends who constantly talk about shul at GBH on a Friday evening and how great it is, which is foreign to me and hence less appealing. An atheist cannot comprehend the feeling of being close to God or enjoy the benefits of religion. While many of these ideas are drawn from my own experiences, they are not inapplicable to that of other atheists in other schools that belong to other religious groups. So, why put yourself in the crossfire? Why be an atheist in a religious school? Religious schools often have an educational benefit as they are generally higher rated in academics, as well as making up the majority of private schools, 96% in Australia. Academics put aside, atheists often find value in religious education. Myself identifying as a Jewish atheist, I take great pride in learning about my heritage and culture, despite not having a religious connection. A religious school is a representation of community and culture beyond its educational and religious standpoint. All these provide a near perfect upbringing for any student, with only religious beliefs causing slight tension. To finish, I'd like to quickly discuss why I chose to talk about this topic. It isn't to wrongly persuade you of whether atheistic or religious beliefs are better, nor is it to inform you of the hardships of atheists in religious schools to garner pity, as we all find comfort in our own convictions. Instead, it was to enlighten you all to the idea of differing beliefs which are prevalent in your lives. By discussing this, I'm able to breed a culture of open-mindedness, which can be applied in all aspects of life when dealing with different people of differing beliefs. That way, we can limit the number of people caught in the crossfire. Thank you.
Thank you for that very informative speech on differing beliefs.
Next up from 9A, who will be speaking about the decision to internalize or express your emotions.
Here I stand, lonely but in a bustling crowd, during the light of day but in the mist of darkness, listening to a silent yet roaring reverberation. I am unable to decide my fate, unable to separate fantasy from reality, lost and confused. I have presented you with the vivid image of being caught in a crossfire, exemplifying the awfully painful feeling of being stuck impotently amid a conflict within your very own mind, swelled with confusion and misunderstanding. A crossfire I find myself caught in is the inability to decide between two contesting and contradictory paths, a path of ease, but immense, rapidly increasing pain, and the other being a difficult path that utilizes vast amounts of courage and strength, but ultimately results in happiness and peace of mind. The first path represents the unhealthy notion of containing one's feelings internally, and the other is that an individual is encouraged to express these feelings, releasing them in an act of emotional acceptance and understanding. Thus, when one is caught in this crossfire, what shall they do? Which path do they decide to embark upon? Internalizing and avoiding challenging emotions, be it due to the fear of seeming weak or the unwillingness to feel the negativity, will not make them go away. Rather, unknowingly allow them to worsen steadily until it devours one's entirety to reveal the remains of an empty, melancholic vessel, drowning in helplessness and hopelessness. They persist in an insincere existence by wearing a mask that portrays an inauthentic facade, performing a disingenuous charade, continuously playing a part in an unconsciously imagined reality of delusive contentment. Behind this mask remains that hopeless puppeteer hiding those true emotions. As they continue to dig themselves further and further, their unspoken feelings fill them with weakness until they are unable to escape an almost inescapable pit of earnest emotion. In acquiescence of this helplessness, this terrifying path becomes the easiest but most painful option. The deeper one falls into this pit of earnest emotion, the more resilience, courage, and strength they require in order to eventually escape their anguish. Upon this road to salvation, and with much adversity, one must release what they are truly feeling, whether it be verbally or through non-verbal emotional expression. Despite being what feels to be an endless path of rigor, that might be an almost impossible journey to begin. With time, with will, and with the support from loved ones, one will eventually find themselves attaining a healthy mentality. Despite the hiding of true emotion being effortless and seemingly painless, this path only brings further damage to one's emotional and even physical well-being. Contrastingly, with the difficult path of emotional release, one will find peace of mind. If you ever discover yourself caught in this crossfire, facing much adversity and deciding the fate of your emotional well-being, it is crucial to employ the resources around you and avoid the suppression of your feelings, ultimately allowing you to escape your mental affliction and break free from the crossfire. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech on the decision to contain one's feelings or to express yourself and your emotions.
Now please welcome from 9B to present his speech about asylum seekers caught in the crossfire.
Imagine living in a war-torn country where your life is at risk and the odds of reaching adulthood decrease every day. When you're on the wrong side of those in power, life is full of uncertainty. You fear being beaten just for giving someone a wrong look. You're anxious that your friends and family will disappear from your life. And you worry that a stray bullet may be the end of you. Desperate to get you out of the crossfire, your family will do anything to help you have a better life with opportunities for peace, prosperity, and stability. Using whatever money they've saved and every contact they know, they arrange for you to be smuggled away past the border. Months on risky land journeys with strangers on crowded trucks, or by foot through foreign lands, you then find yourself ushered onto a rickety boat to get to the promised land of freedom. The water is rough, people are seasick, they are crammed together in anticipation and fear of what may come next, and the rickety boat threatens to capsize at any moment. The moonlight shines on the towering waves that dance on the ocean's surface, creating a symphony of angry movements that attack and mangle the already dilapidated and unseaworthy vessel. As the boat groans towards Australia, you lament the fact that you may never see your family again. You were caught in the crossfire, a life without freedom or choices. No freedom was available for you in the dangerous life that you were born into, and no freedom to choose if you wanted to stay with your family anyway. As your boat continues to heave forward, it is intercepted by Coast Guards. Without official paperwork to prove your identity, you find yourself caught in the crossfire once again. You are treated as a suspected criminal or terrorist and placed in detention. You are stuck in a place that is your prison. The freedom that your family sought for you seems far from reality. In detention, you cannot choose what you eat, where to sleep, or how to exercise. Life is empty, dreams are fading, and your physical and mental health suffer. Your only chance is legal representation that can articulate how you are a good person and that your life would be under threat if you were to go back to your home country. This is the story behind many people who are struggling in the detention centres as asylum seekers. They suffer immensely, having escaped the crossfire of war or persecution in their country of origin, only to be caught up in a very different crossfire of bureaucracy and laws of a country aimed at preventing them from entering and becoming accepted as citizens. Years can pass by without an asylum seeker's case being resolved. Recently, there's been much media attention about the Billowella family from Queensland who'd been sent to Christmas Island. a family of 2 young children, in limbo, no rights. Caught in the crossfire of legal arguments, languishing with uncertainty, public opinion and media attention will hopefully keep this family in the spotlight for long enough to give them the right to settle in Australia and become productive members of society. By understanding the hardships that the asylum seekers go through, we are morally obligated to do our best to help them move out of the crossfires that they encounter. Our government has put asylum seekers in this dismal situation where they are caught in the crossfires of the law. In order to help fix this issue, it is imperative that the legal process is changed to help give fairer legal avenues to refugees seeking asylum in Australia. This can be achieved through fundraising, contacting our local members of parliament with our concerns, creating petitions, or participating in protests and rallies to help influence the process of change. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us about asylum seekers caught in the crossfire.
Next up is from 9B, who will be speaking about social media's effect on mental health.
A day in the life of a typical teenager. You come in from school, grab a snack and head to your room, ready to unwind. Picking up your phone, you begin to scroll, all the way down the rabbit hole. A tsunami of content engulfs you. Video after video, photo after photo, comparison after comparison, insecurities magnified. Does this sound familiar? Today, I will discuss the impact of social media on our everyday lives. Firstly, I will outline an issue with superficial influencers who utilize their following to promote unhealthy standards. I will then explain how detrimental social media is to consumers' mental health, and then describe the toll this can take on the vulnerable individual. Last week, as I was scrolling on TikTok, I came across a clip from a recent interview with the Kardashians. Kim was asked if she believed her and her family were promoting unattainable standards of beauty. I was stunned by her response. She claims that they are simply promoting a healthy lifestyle. The majority of social influencers online only reveal their fabricated lives. In reality, what appears to be a fairy tale through posts is substantially a life alike to our own. The positive is posted and the negative is concealed. Inevitably, we find ourselves comparing, picking apart their orchestrated lives in contrast to our own. Obviously, no one's life is perfect. However, it is ever too easy to place a filter on a situation and make it seem like something is not. This is the tool that social media encourages. Social media is omnipresent and dictates facets of our lives. Young people around the world are dependent on social media. They are inadvertently fed media which often makes them feel inadequate. They are caught in the crossfire in constant reminders of endless photos and videos of lives they can never attain, simply because such lives do not exist. How often do you look in the mirror and fixate on the aspects of yourself that society deems not good enough? An overload of social media content leads to overthinking, comparison, and jealousy. This cyclical torment directly impacts mental health. Research has found that social media use can affect self-esteem and make typical teenage pressures significantly worse. 45% of teenagers in the world are online. Of these teens, 97% use apps such as Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. Out of the 97% on social media, 13% of kids ages 12 to 17 report depression, and 32% report anxiety as an outcome of high usage on social media. These numbers are ever increasing, especially in our day and age. In conclusion, there is a direct correlation between social media usage and depleting mental health. Teenagers are drawn to social media. It acts as a powerful vortex for this generation. Many influencers who gain momentum in this space compound the magnitude of the problem. The full weight of social media and its implications is not considered when the average teenager becomes engaged and connected to the online world. The lure of social media ensnares the teenager to be caught in the crossfire. Thank you.
Thank you for that informative speech on insecurities and unrealistic standards brought to us by social media.
Now, could we all please welcome from 9C to present us a speech about the nature of politics?
Politics is messy. Politicians of different opinions constantly vying for our support make for a news cycle full of confusing stories about all sorts of issues. But for those of you who do follow it closely, you may have noticed an interesting phenomenon. Politicians don't always act in our best interest. Not only that, they often don't even try to. Their decisions are influenced more by what they believe will earn them the most votes than what they believe will be most beneficial to citizens. And we, the citizens, are caught in the crossfire of their fight for our support. A recent example of such a situation is the souring of the already strained relationship between Australia and China. Last December, a senior Chinese government official posted a doctored image to Twitter. The repugnant image depicted an Australian soldier holding a bloodied knife to the throat of an Afghan child. In a populist attempt to appeal to nationalistic pride, Prime Minister Morrison demanded an apology from the Chinese government, claiming that Australia's honour was hurt. Although that reaction was seemingly provoked, China retaliated by tightening trade sanctions on Australian exports. Despite being entirely uninvolved in the spat between politicians, many thousands of Australians were caught in the crossfire. Although not in power, the opposition, and not just the Labor one we have currently, often provide examples of prioritising votes over benefit to the citizens. As the name suggests, to win votes, the opposition must often oppose government policy, sometimes even if they believe the legislation proposed would be beneficial to the general populace. Not only does this mean that the legislation they campaign for can be substandard, it also leads to greater polarization amongst the politically inclined. Most people who follow politics are loyal to one party, and changing their allegiance would take a large error by the party they support. This means that if the opposition vehemently disagrees with the government, or vice versa, there will be more disagreement and discord amongst other Australians, a problem that can escalate very quickly. If we are to preserve the prosperity of this great country, we must ensure that our politicians are held to a higher standard, and there is only one way to do this: educate ourselves about politics. We do not necessarily have to keep up with the day-to-day developments, but it is important to understand general ideas so that when politicians don't act in our best interest, we can hold them accountable for it. This will remove us from any crossfire and ensure that over time, policy that is in our interests and policy that will win politician votes become one and the same, leading to a better life for all Australians. Thank you.
Thank you for that very interesting speech about how politicians don't always act in our best interest.
Next up is from 9C, who will be speaking about being caught in your own crossfire.
Being caught in any sort of crossfire is never a pleasant experience. Whether it is literally a hail of bullets or a fight between friends or loved ones. However, there is another sort of crossfire that is very easy to get caught in, but is rarely acknowledged, let alone addressed. This is being caught in your own crossfire. One of the reasons I find making plans with friends so difficult is that I'm constantly caught in my own crossfire between fear of missing out, also known as FOMO, and the anxiety I feel before, during, and after seeing friends. This creates a cycle akin to a circular firing squad. There is simply no way I escape unscathed. It goes something like this. I settle into the habit of not seeing friends because I let myself be busy with work. Then, once my workload eases, I'm initially content with not seeing people. But when I see my friends hanging out together and making plans, I suddenly miss them, and my fear of losing them and those relationships intensifies. This gets worse when I see that I'm drifting from some of my friends, and I am not as close with them as I would like, because I don't see them enough. Then the anxiety gets worse, the barrage of bullets gets stronger, and I'm compelled to summon the courage to make an arrangement. There seems to be a very simple solution to this, right? Invite a few friends over, get into the habit of doing it, and boom, problem solved. But as I said, for those of us with anxiety, it's not that easy. When the anxiety from not seeing anyone and fear of losing my friends gets to the point where I decide to organize a hangout, the angst about not seeing my friends retreats to the background and is replaced by anxiety about said arrangement. Before I meet up with anyone, the thoughts going through my head are, does my text sound weird? Do they want to hang out with me? Am I annoying? Do I seem desperate? Do they even like me? Eventually, though, the day comes, I see my friend and I have a nice time. But afterwards, the same thoughts and doubts resurface, and the vicious cycle begins anew. For some people, this crossfire is like being hit with foam darts. For others, it feels like bullets, or even cannonballs. For me, it can feel like intercontinental ballistic missiles are raining down on me, and I have nowhere to run. So, how can you possibly protect against this? Obviously, Israel's Iron Dome defense system won't be much use here. As someone who deals with this, some simple things that may help are starting small, gently pushing your boundaries, and most importantly, being kind to yourself. But what can others do? If you see me looking down, ask me if I'm okay. And please remember that what's easy for you can be overwhelming for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech on being caught in your own crossfire and the anxiety that follows.
Please welcome now from 9D to present his speech about Adam Goods.
If you're anything like me, you have grown up inspired by the stories of our heroes. Whether they are athletes, actors, or scientists, all of them have faced certain hardships and been caught in heartbreaking crossfires and dilemmas to get to where they are today. Not many individuals have inspired a people and changed a nation whilst in a crossfire, quite like Adam Goods. Adam grew up in a small town called Wallaroo in South Australia. His mother was Aboriginal while his father was English, and when he was just 4 years old, his parents were divorced. So he and his two younger brothers were raised by their single mother. Despite being bullied due to his mixed heritage, Adam still truly embraced his Aboriginal Australian identity from a very young age. Goods attended Merbane West Primary School, and it was there where his football journey began. At the time, he was a soccer player, but they didn't have a soccer team for him to join, so he decided to join the football team. Instantaneously, he fell in love with the game, eventually to become a generational talent out of his small town. Goods was drafted with the 43rd pick in the 1997 AFL draft to the Sydney Swans. He debuted in 1999 and was awarded the NAB AFL Rising Star Award, which is given to the best player in their first season. Adam won countless accolades throughout his career, a premiership, a Brownlow medal, 4 All-Australian selections, and he was named an Aboriginal Team of the Century. But it was later in his career when he was caught in the tragic crossfire between prolific racism within the AFL culture and his love and passion for the game. An incident that sparked Goods' fight against racism took place in the Indigenous round in 2013 against Collingwood. A 13-year-old girl called him an 8 from the stands. Unexpectedly, Goods heard the girl and confronted her, demanding that she would be ejected from the stadium. All of a sudden, a crossfire began between the fans that stuck up for Goods and his fight against racism, and others that believed that what he did was wrong and unnecessary. And Adam was stuck right in the center of it. The hatred did not stop there. Goods was the subject to constant racist booing in every AFL match he took part in, eventually taking a toll on his mental health and essentially forcing him to take a break from the game. However, like all our heroes, Adam managed to get back up and keep fighting for what he believed in. Adam returned to the game late in 2015 to end his career, while still advocating against racism. Not only did Adam work in countless Aboriginal youth groups and communities and have an unforgettable AFL career, but he inspired the Aboriginal community of Australia to stand up against racism and truly embrace their culture and identity. Through all his actions, he raised awareness about the discrimination against the Indigenous people of Australia and was awarded the 2014 Australian of the Year for his leadership. He truly silenced the haters and is one of, if not the most influential athletes in Australian history. Adam Goods has led by example and has taught me to stand up for what I believe in, even when caught in between two powerful and opposing forces, namely the AFL and its supporters. When caught in the crossfire, Adam managed to dig deep and get in touch with his core values. If I am ever in a similar situation, I only hope I can do the same.
Thank you for that very enlightening speech about Adam Goods being caught in the crossfire.
Next up is from 9E, who will be speaking about the internal crossfire in a teenager's mind.
Teenagers. We don't always make the smartest decisions, from getting heavily intoxicated at a friend's party to cheating on a test, or to some seriously questionable Instagram post. The teenage years are tumultuous and full of change, and we are often faced with our own internal crossfire when making the decision between good and bad. There are many factors that go into the human decision-making process, and you may ask, why is a teenager more likely to make impulsive decisions or bad choices? Looking from a medical standpoint, including the functions of the human brain, the frontal lobe is what controls the process of our decision-making. It does not fully develop until early adulthood, around the age of 25. The connection between brain development and the risk of making poor choices is referred to as psychosocial maturity. Psychosocial immaturity in teens makes them more susceptible to seek excitement, engage in risk-taking behavior, or make decisions that focus on short-term gains. Taking a psychoanalytical lens, we look at the theory of Sigmund Freud, a famous neurologist and founder of psychoanalysis. He states that the human psyche has three systems: the id, the ego, and the superego. These all develop at different stages in our lives and affect how we act and make decisions. This theory is similar to the analogy of the angel and devil sitting on our shoulders. The id is the impulsive part of our psyche, which responds instantly to basic urges and desires. You could refer to him as the devil, as he is chaotic and unreasonable. A newborn child is all id, and only later does it develop an ego and superego. For example, a tantrum a toddler may throw for not getting a toy they want. The ego mediates between the id and the reality of the real world. The ego is important as it contemplates all decisions, making us cautious of our choices, therefore leading us to likely get caught in the crossfire for longer. The superego's function is to control the id's aggressive nature. You could say he's the angel that watches over you. In contrast, the superego can also punish the ego when it gives in to the id's demands. For example, that feeling of guilt you get after making a bad decision. Although not fully developed at our age, the elements of id, ego, and superego can help teenagers to end their internal crossfire and overall make better decisions. Let's imagine a situation where you were invited to a big party with all your friends, but you were grounded by your parents. The devil may say, sneak out and go have fun. However, the angel may say, stay at home and listen to your parents. This would be a good time to call a ceasefire and remember these few steps. Firstly, encourage yourself to stop and think. Before making any irrational decisions, give your brain time to process. Secondly, consider the consequences of the choice and ask yourself if the bad choice is necessary or if there are other options to explore. Thirdly, if you're not sure, speak to an older sibling, a trusted friend, or an adult to get some guidance and support. However, if you end up siding with the devil and later regret your decision, use the mistake as a learning opportunity and try not to repeat it in the future. In closing, no one is perfect, and we are all bound to make mistakes. In time, we can learn to make smart decisions and listen more to our egos rather than our ids. And so the raging crossfires us teenagers may face constantly in our minds will burn out into small flames as we grow and learn to control our devilish instincts. Thank you.
Thank you for that informative speech focusing on how teenagers make decisions.
Now, please welcome from 9E to talk about the cost of inertia.
The natural world is a unique and majestic phenomenon. Billions upon billions of individual life forms, much like a puzzle, lead lives that interlock in a way that not only sustains themselves, but everything around them. This delicate balance is in peril as we continue to debate the legitimacy of climate change and place wealth and profit above what makes our planet unique. In the center of a vast oceanic expanse floats an iceberg smaller than the room I'm standing in right now. On its blisteringly cold surface paces the largest land carnivore known to man, a polar bear. It has been weeks since her last meal. Wet fur thinly wraps her skeletal body. Previously, when she had made this last-ditch attempt at survival, it had taken a matter of hours to find a new home. But as she inevitably found out, too much can change within 5 years. She places her weak and injured paw on the edge of the iceberg and jumps back, startled as it crumbles into the sea. She lay down whimpering, flinching briefly as the frozen surface touches her stomach. Hope was a distant memory. Throughout her lifetime, this magnificent creature has witnessed one of the most drastic losses of habitat in the past 100 years. Areas thousands of kilometers wide that were once covered in ice sheets are now simply a cold, barren ocean. This can be attributed to the massive spike in global temperatures we have created through hundreds of years of fossil fuel consumption. As a result, our ice caps are melting, our oceans are boiling, sea levels are rising, and as seen in the 2020 bushfire season, extreme and unpredictable weather events have become increasingly more common. Rather than facing this issue head-on, governments choose to hide behind the false rhetoric that a transfer to sustainable energy sources will be detrimental for our economy in order to keep large corporations on their side. This is taking a massive toll on our planet's biodiversity as billions of creatures' habitats are becoming inhospitable, destroying the delicate balance of our living world. On the other side of the planet, pushing its way through a once thriving ecosystem, the Sumatran orangutan climbs onto a fallen tree. All around him was a graveyard, an area the size of 5 MCGs wiped out within days. A wave of complete and utter sorrow comes over him. Within the fallen canopy lies the corpses of countless species who could not react in time, from birds to reptiles to other orangutans. In the distance, he could hear the clanging of metal and the creaks and groans of falling trees. Nothing could allow him to comprehend the reasoning behind such an act. All he could do was watch and mourn for his fallen brethren as the final reminder to a forgotten magic. By the end of my speech today, around 600 acres or 2.5 million square meters of rainforest have been cut and burned down globally to make way for farming, agriculture, logging, and mining. Although many governments attempt to protect their rainforests as much as possible, they are fragmented. Entire national parks are surrounded by mines and plantations, and illegal loggers work with impunity while corrupt governments open their pockets and look away. All it takes is the promise of wealth and power, and people whose responsibility it is to protect our environment and by extension, our futures, cast it aside to better their own self-interests. The constant deliberation of this seemingly existential crisis and the preoccupation with the over-politicized aspects of climate change sacrifices our planet's biodiversity in the process. Our natural world is caught in the crossfire of incompetent and self-interested leaders and money-hungry corporations afraid to lose their power and profits. It is our responsibility to hold them accountable and reduce our consumption of harmful products in order to save our planet, our future, and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that very informative speech on the cost of inertia.
The next speaker is from 9F, who will be talking about the controversies of the COVID-19 vaccines.
Waiting dormantly in line, frightened from what I'm about to go through with. It's just a little pinch, I tell myself. But it's not the pain I'm afraid of. What long-term ramifications will I suffer from? There's so much stigma around getting an injection. But what about the blood clotting and the chance of developing Alzheimer's when I'm older? Now, as we know, there are multiple COVID-19 vaccines available to us as Australians, but there are so many theories out there of what could possibly happen when we inject these unnatural substances into our bodies. Many believe in the possibility of major health impacts when it comes to the recently developed vaccines. Discussing the idea of receiving the vaccine can be peer pressuring and uncomfortable for many. As people, we have many influences, such as others around us, the media, and what our government tells us. They can all be widely different, and that is why we can often find ourselves caught in the middle. It can be viewed as shameful if you get the vaccine or if you don't. The encouragement from both sides is thought-provoking, but creates an unnecessary amount of distress and hesitance. Influence from the media is greatly authoritative and subconsciously creates a dominant judgment. Generation Z adopts knowledge ever so easily just by reading something posted on social media or an article that may contain false information. We're willing to believe anything these days. We're often drawn to statistics and numbers. It's simpler to digest, but who knows if any of that is actually true. Just over a quarter of the world's population have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. We know that us teenagers got the vaccine available to us last as we are the least vulnerable age group. But the government is constantly changing the age range of who can get what vaccine. And recently in Israel, they've discovered that the vaccine can sometimes result in heart inflammation in younger males. They can't possibly make any concrete decisions. Would you trust injecting a substance into your body that is so new and up in the air? They tested the flu vaccine for 10 years before making it available to the public. Now, why is it that people are against the vaccine, you ask? Well, we've all heard of the anti-vaxxers and the stereotypical Karens, but don't mute them just yet. Many people are unsettled with the thought of pumping their bodies with chemicals that their bodies could already potentially kill off with the assistance of natural bacteria. It is unnatural to inject so many substances into our veins and have them do the work for us. With new strains coming out, new vaccines need to be produced, and we will constantly need to top up and receive new immunizations against them. But we can't forget the people that are all for the vaccine. They too have a strong voice, driven by the desire for normality once again. People want to receive the vaccine in order to achieve what is known as herd immunity. Herd immunity is reached when there is a sufficient amount of people immune to an infection, whether that is through a vaccine or through previous infections. It prevents a further spread. This would mean no more lockdowns, really. No more masks or only 4 reasons to leave your home. No more 5-kilometer radiuses or curfews. It would also mean protection for people with vulnerable immune systems, like the elderly living in aged care, or people with compromised immune systems. You can travel again, companies would be up and running. It appears as the answer to lead us back to normal again. It's a safe option and one that many people are leaning towards. So getting vaccinated makes sense, right? It is difficult finding yourself caught in the middle of all of this. The make or break choice whether to get vaccinated or not, it's a similar experience to when voting for a new prime minister. Your political views can harm relationships just like your decision to get the vaccine. You receive judgment, and as humans, that's what we fear most. Sitting on the fence seems like the easy way out, right? You're caught in the crossfire and it's difficult to decide. So are you really caught up in it all, or is your finger actually on a trigger? Thank you.
Thank you for that speech on the rumours surrounding the different COVID-19 vaccines.
Now let's all welcome from 9F to present her speech about women on war, women at war.
When you think of conflict zones or wars, you often think of men with weapons fighting other men in an intense battle. You may think of women and children sorrowfully sending letters from afar to their loved ones who are fighting the battle. However, it turns out that women and children are too often caught in the crossfire of these fights, and they end up suffering shocking hardships. During World War II, both my maternal and paternal great-grandfathers went to fight in North Africa. Both grandmothers were left alone in South Africa to raise, feed, and educate their children whilst working full-time. Even though they were not directly involved in fighting the war, they suffered the consequences and were indirectly caught in the crossfire. Even years later, they would tell my parents the hardships and trauma they endured trying to raise their families. Food was scarce, and they would use every last scrap to feed their children food, like spoiled vegetables, chicken fat, and animal offal. New clothes were a luxury, and clothes were worn until they were nearly rags. UNICEF reports that women face gender-based inequality during armed conflicts, such as violence, including rape and sexual slavery, hunger and exploitation in camps for refugees and internally displaced persons when men take control of food distribution, malnutrition when food aid neglects women and children's special nutritional requirements, and culturally inappropriate and inadequate access to health services, including mental and reproductive services. Militants often use children as young as 6 years old in violent confrontations in areas of Africa, Asia, and South America. Strict gender roles in some societies dictate how girls and women are expected to behave. Girls must take care of cooking and care of their households and communities. This creates a huge demand for girls in conflict-affected areas, leading them to be caught in the midst of these dangerous zones. War and the destruction it brings also means living in an area without basic amenities such as toilets. Women and girls must sometimes walk for kilometers to find water or a concealed area to use the toilet, making them easy targets of traffickers. A lady I know named Namira lived in Bosnia during the 90s with her husband and children. Her husband was visiting Croatia with one of their children, and Namira was home with her son when the civil war started. They were separated for a year, had no communication with each other, and did not know if the other was still alive. Namira told me that women are often the biggest victims of war, as they are primarily responsible for the well-being of their family. When fighting came close, she had to move suddenly, with nothing to eat, no money, and only the clothes her and her son were wearing. She told me that 30 years later, she still has nightmares where she has to grab her son and run. As you have heard, women face immense hardships and danger when they are caught in war. Unfortunately, there are many conflicts around the world where innocent people are caught up. We can do something to help though. We can support charities such as the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, and UNICEF, all of which take care of people in war zones. By supporting these charities, we support the women and children stuck in these conflict areas, and we help them to escape and start a new life where they are not caught in the crossfire any longer.
Thank you very much for that illuminating speech about women at war. Now I'd like to say thank you and congratulations to all the speakers on your tremendous efforts. Every speaker did very well and should be very proud of their efforts. But there'll now be a short interval whilst Rabbi Kennard makes his decision on who will be the winner of the Year 9 Baron Snider 2021.
Okay, Rabbi Kennard, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me put into gallery view so I can see lots of people. So thank you for the opportunity to adjudicate. It's always a great pleasure, particularly because I can see the development of the skills of our young people. I have the privilege, I think this year, of judging every year's Baron Snider, so I can really see the comparison. And I was particularly impressed with the choice of topic and the presentation of the topics and the really sophisticated way in which these topics were analysed. So a really good, well done to you all. A special thank you for their great job as emceeing. And now I'd just like to say a little bit about what we've learned from each of our contestants. So a good opening is always a good start, and many of you had good openings, but I particularly like way of picturing and describing to us in very graphic but engaging detail what it is like to be in an asylum seeker. So well done there for a really good opening. A lot of you, as I said earlier, had a very sophisticated take, and some of you really developed your use of language. I thought particularly language was really quite beautiful. I didn't actually write any down because it was just flowing. Your use of words and your alliteration and your style and your poetic style just flowed really beautifully. So well done. Now, a lot of you clearly had done a lot of research and collected information. And I thought particularly you showed how many different ways there are to understand the phenomenon of women at war. And you really painted the picture from all different sides and you put it together very well. Now, something I always look for and always like to hear is a good structure, good signposting that takes the audience through one's argument. And I thought a few of you did that very well, but I particularly liked the way asked, first of all, what is an atheist? What is a Jewish school? What are the tensions between the two? And what are the resolutions between the two? And by the way, I particularly liked the way you ended up and the way you resolved the tension between the two. I thought that was excellent, and I happen to agree. Another example of great structure was presentation. You lined up all the arguments against the vaccine, then you lined up the arguments for the vaccine, and then you brought it together in a way that we could all follow what you were doing. I thought you did very well at communicating complex ideas. I'm not a psychologist. I've heard the phrase id and ego and super id, and I've never really understood exactly how they fit together, but now I do. And the way you gave the analogy of an angel and a devil, I thought really made us understand the complex ideas you were talking about. I thought you managed to bring your topic in a way that engaged people personally. It was a topic that's relevant to you and your peer group, and you said things like, how often do you look in the mirror? And you really made the topic relevant to your audience, and so you drew your audience into the topic that you were presenting. And I think taking that stage a little bit further, I think the way you told a story which was highly personal, in fact you talked about yourself, and I must say in a very brave way and a very powerful way, and a way which I think will really help everyone to understand what it means to have anxiety and different types of anxiety. And the way you talked about yourself, I thought was particularly engaging. I think you demonstrated your passion for Adam Goods, your passion for anti-racism, and the way you were speaking and your personal connection to the topic came through really well. I thought you had an excellent speaking style. I think one of the great tensions of public speaking, especially at this sort of level, is this, that on the one hand you want to rehearse your speech over and over again, and you want to know every word off by heart, and you want to rely on cue cards as little as possible. At the same time, you want to sound like you're speaking naturally. And there's often a tension between the two, and often you can sort of descend into a bit of a sing-song, bat mitzvah style speech, which is clearly rehearsed. And it's good to be able to speak as if it's not rehearsed, And I think you pulled that off very well. Also talking about how one speaks, I thought you had a very good voice modulation. You went loud, you went soft, you moved around a bit, you used your whole body and you used your whole voice to as extra ways of telling your story. And finally, and appropriately, let's come to the end of speeches. So the beginning, the first impression is very important, and the last impression is very important, and the way you leave your audience. And you left us with to save our planet, to save out for our future, and for ourselves, which I thought was a very powerful way to end. But you've had enough of my going on and on because you want to know who won. It was hard. I know it's a cliche that someone in my position always says, but it's usually true that it was hard. There were quite a few who could have got the top spot, but unfortunately I'm given the task of identifying one, and I think the best overall was congratulations. And now I will hand back to somebody.
Congratulations for your incredible
thank you.
speech. This speech gave the audience a great insight to the sexualization of women in society. Thank you to all the finalists for presenting your speeches to us all today. Also, a big thank you to Rabbi Kennard for your time to judge this competition and to the audience for listening to these speeches today. Another round of applause to the finalists today who did an amazing job. Well done.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations to all of you. And Maya Mazal Tov, that's very exciting. We're very proud of you. Well done. And to your English teacher who's here.
Yeah, Miss Bella.